Hello and welcome to The Offload. I'm your host, Phoenix Trinidad. This is Zero Tackle's newest show where we talk all things NRL and rugby league every week. And this week, we are joined by NRL Premiership winner and Origin player, Jamie Soward, and we chat everything that happened in round two. We're also going to be talking about the new Dragons halves combination and what to make of it, and what to make of Jeremiah Nanai being dropped. Was that the right call or the wrong call? We'll find out. It's a big episode. Let's get to it. All right, and joining us for the offload this week, we have, as always, Darren Parkin, Zero Tackle analyst and Storm fan. How are you, buddy?
Going well, yeah. I mean, it's probably remiss not to talk about that Roosters-Panthers result before we jump into it. I mean, wanted to rattle off those stats. Obviously, Panthers, first time they've conceded 38 in a game in nearly 3 years. And, in terms of aggregates and things like that, it's remarkable. I mean, the Roosters, who had last year what we thought was a top four roster, couldn't get anywhere near them. And all the list changes. And last week, probably not unfairly, we were talking about whether they were a potential wooden spoon side. And they come out and beat the four-time reigning premiers, and that probably forecast what was a really topsy-turvy week and makes your tipsters scratch your head, that's for sure.
Yeah, some crazy stuff early in the season as always. And a guy that was actually at that game, so making his first appearance on the Offload podcast, Lush, host of the post-credit show and Sharks fan, obviously. How are you, buddy?
Doing well, mate. Doing well. Yeah, that was definitely a game. Got to say, the Roosters' first try really kind of set a shockwave through the entire crowd. The crowd was electric. There was a lot of toing and froing going on there, but it just, mind blown after that game. What a weekend. What a weekend of footy.
Absolutely. And we are also joined, very special guest, Mr. Jamie Soward, former NRL Premiership winner, 2010 with the Dragons, Origin player, coached the Dragons, NRLW, and played 216 NRL games as well to top it off. How are you, mate?
I'm very well, thanks, boys. It was a topsy-turvy round in the NRL. I think, first initial thoughts is I think it's great for the NRL that there was a couple of upsets and everyone, tipping wise, would have been a nightmare. But it probably, I think realises that footy is, it's a long time between the last loss and when you play again. So happy to see that some of those results went the way of the winning teams, but geez, there's some teams down that are struggling early on in the season too. I think that's probably a bigger alarm for the NRL.
Absolutely. And we're going to get straight into that with the rundown, starting with Warriors beating the Sea Eagles 36-16. Darren, was that the real Wars? Obviously, they're coming back from Vegas. Pretty disappointing over in Vegas, but that was a nice win in the hometown.
Yeah, beaten by 30 one week and then win by 20 the next against a Manly team that looked like they were, the front runners to take the Roosters spot in the top four this season with the way they played in their opening game. And, these two sides, had questions, both sides finalists last year. And, I mean, the Warriors, it was probably the best of them. They're the third highest scoring team in the comp last year, but had the poorest defensive record of the finals, and that points to a team that can get opened up when it doesn't go very well or can absolutely bury you when they're up and about. So they've just got to, like Manly, I guess, close the gap between their best and their worst. That big forward pack just dominated. A couple of the Eagles' tries were somewhat controversial as well, so the margin could have been a fair bit greater than it actually was. And I think Metcalf sort of summed up the Warriors' response in that he struggled in Vegas and then dominated this game, and they really did hit back. So for them, it's now A, consistency, and then B, taking it with them on the road.
Yeah, did you catch that game, Sowie?
I did. I was sort of watching it. I was at a wedding, so I'm not going to lie and say that I was doing the nitty-gritty stats like Daz. But I think that the one thing for the Warriors is that consistency. At home, after COVID, they've got such a strong fan base there now. It's never been more popular to be a Warriors fan, and I think they were everyone's second team. It's a matter of getting that and tuning into wins. I agree with Daz. Luke Metcalf in week one I thought was below par, and after a pre-season of training as being the main guy, probably expect a little bit more. As for Manly though, a couple of injuries, it's sort of the bubble burst really quickly. They were outstanding in round one, and like a lot of teams, just didn't carry that form on. But credit to the Warriors, big crowd at home, no one expected them to play the way that they did. But now it's finding that consistency.
I wanted to ask you, Sowie, as someone who's been in the system, when you get a coach like Anthony Seibold came out after the game and a bit of plausible deniability with the injuries to a couple of the boys, Trbojevic, etc. The whole I haven't spoken to the doctor yet. Have coaches not spoken to the doctor? Is that actually legitimate in the sense that I won't talk to the doctor because then I don't have the answers and I can actually be honest when I say I don't know? Or are they literally just sort of straight batting that away when they know full well the situation? It turns out they're both probably okay, but at the time, is it cards close to the chest, or would they not speak to them so they just don't know?
I think there's a couple of ways to look at it. They wouldn't be telling. There's got no obligation to give the media or next week's opposition a leg up in terms of their preview and stuff like that. So you'll always say that they're in. The other part is, with backs, in terms of your actual back, not outside backs, but Ches looking the way that he was very stiff. So that stuff can settle down very, very quickly, or it can be niggling for a while. So he probably wouldn't know. The physio and the doctor would have said, mate, he's got back spasms. We'll have to wait and see. As for the hamstring, what a nightmare. I mean, he went away, Tom Trbojevic. So much of what they're doing rests on him being at fullback. And he probably wouldn't know because the scans and stuff like that. So I think it's a little bit 50-50. They're not really sure what it all looked like. It's not like you broke your arm and you're out for a certain amount, or that stuff will heal. So, I think there's a bit of sort of toing and froing there from Anthony Seibold for sure.
Yeah, I think DCE has been cleared of anything serious, and I'm not sure on the other end. But moving down now to the Dragons and Rabbitohs. So that was a pretty entertaining game in the end. What to make of the new Dragons halves combination, Sowie? What did you think, your old mob?
Yeah, well, they've lost 2 games in a row, boys, so that's probably the disappointing thing. They've had 2 home games. When you look at the draw at the start of the year, you think, okay, we've got to at least get one of those, and they probably should have got both of them, to be fair. The Bulldogs, gave them a chance in that game last week, and then on the weekend, they led for a long time. I think that Shane Flanagan's comments, not being disrespectful to the average punter that supports NRL, but they probably don't really understand the intricate nature of what he goes through week to week with his halves, and one of them's his son. So I think you look at the comments and you think, okay, Shane Flanagan, he's going to come out and he's had a crack, and he has had a crack at his halves, but I think it's more around his spine and some of his leaders as well. That game was for the taking. They led 24-12. They didn't even look like setting up for a field goal when it was 24-all. And full credit to Wayne Bennett and South Sydney. Tough environment. Still some of their superstars out, and they found a way to hang in that game, and Jamie Humphrey slotted it. So, Dragons on huge watch next week against Melbourne after the bye this week. And there's probably nothing worse when you play like the way that you did. You should have won that game at home. Now you've got a long turnaround, and everyone's going to be watching next week when you take on Melbourne.
Yeah, did you manage to catch that one, Lush?
Yeah, I watched probably the last 20 minutes of it. I'll say probably watched the most entertaining 20 minutes of it. You really did get the sense that the Dragons are missing Ben Hunt at the moment. They're missing that middle who's just really gonna that halfback who's really just gonna take control of the game and just game manage their way into that win, because that win was there for them to take and they flubbed it. Sowie's right. They never really looked like they were going to go for the play to win the game, which was really disappointing for the Dragons. But yeah, look, it's hard because for me, from the very onset to the year, I know everyone's saying that Flanagan's recruited really well, and Flanagan is a phenomenal coach. He has a track record of being a premiership winning coach. I would know, but I just don't see it for the Dragons this year to the point that they're my smoky for the wooden spoon.
Wow, where do you have them this year, Sowie?
I don't have them near the wooden spoon. I think that there's enough talent there to be able to win some games, and you have a look at the teams that are 0-2 as well. And I think the one thing about the Dragons is that probably Flano won't let them finish with a wooden spoon. They were tipped to get the wooden spoon the last 5 years with Ben Hunt, even last year, and they almost made the 8. So Some growing pains early. The frustrating thing for Dragons fans is you've had Ben Hunt, who's gone to the Broncos and played great week one and had a couple of try assists, and you want that ex-girlfriend back, but she didn't want to be here. So you may as well break up with her and move on, which is what they're trying to do. The growing pains, unfortunately, though, on the weekend showed when it got 24 all, and that's where you miss it, But overall, I think that both parties left amicably last year, and knowing Shane as I do, I think he would have been happy to move on, but those ones on the weekend hurt. That's 9-7-6-1. They have enough games experience out there, Lush, I think, to come up, whether it's Ben Hunt, whether it's Lockie Ilias, they had enough experience out there on the weekend to win that game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and when we were doing our preseason predictions kind of thing, Dragons were one of those teams that we had in that sort of that high range where they could sort of finish in that bottom four, but make it all to the sort of bottom end of the top 8 as well.
Yeah, we thought they might not have had the same upside as some of those teams around them, but they were putting in that sort of honest effort, and I think you saw that with their opposition. I mean, credit to the Bunnies, who've got an extensive injury list for the Wayne Bennett era, the second stanza at that club, and they find a way. Obviously, they picked up a couple more in this game, which hurts them a little bit going forward. But yeah, I think, as much as the Dragons should have won the game, it was the Rabbitohs who stood up when it mattered most. And I think it's that type of thing that that we saw a little bit from the Dragons last year, that squeezing every drop out of themselves, which the Bunnies have rediscovered themselves this season.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, moving on now to the Bulldogs and the Titans. Bulldogs red hot to start the season. So, but unfortunately, Lush, Matt Burton and Cacao are going to miss the next month of footy. So they've got some things to work through there.
Yeah, wow. Week 2 of the 2025 season, and we're already talking about players dropping like flies around the game. Really, really disappointing for the biggest boot in the game, Mr. Matt Burton. I think the Bulldogs are really going to miss that boot. I think they're really going to miss that game control. And Kickout, you don't come across very many players that can break the line like he can. I think the Bulldogs have got enough power across the field. I think they've got enough speed in their back line. I think they'll do all right next week. They've got the Parramatta Eels, so I think they'll be able to hold that winning streak for at least another week or two. After Parramatta, obviously, they've got my boys, the Sharkies, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Do we know for sure that Burton has confirmed MCL injury out for a period of time?
Yeah, confirmed MCL last night. I think the troubling thing for me when I look at the Dogs is they played at Belmore, they got off to that cracker start, they switched off like they did against the Dragons, and 40-24, people are going to say they won and they're 2-0. You can't do that against the Sharks in 2 weeks. I hope they don't look past Parramatta, and I hope they go week by week, but you can't be letting in 24 points and expecting to score 40 every single week. The best teams, the Penriths, the Melbournes, to win a premiership, I don't know what the average is now, Daz will probably know, but the average points, you have to be in that top 2 or 3 defensively, and last night, what I saw from the Dogs' first 20 minutes was outstanding. What I saw in the last 10 minutes before half-time wasn't great. So, Kickout's a loss, Burton's a loss. I reckon they've got enough guys to be able to fill it. Don't forget Connor Tracy's played in the halves. They've got Blake Taff. They've got a young guy in Alex Conti who's been playing well in the SG ball, who potentially could come up if they need to. So, they'll have enough there, but it's just going to be, I think defensively they've dropped off a little bit this year.
Yeah, and further to that point, obviously we've seen Penrith do that, where last year their scoring dropped away, but their defence stayed solid, and obviously they won the title again. And I think historically, NRL, AFL, even soccer, basketball in Australia, sides that have been ranked top 4, you don't win premierships unless you rank top 4 defensively. Sides can win it with 7th or 8th best attack, but generally that defence has to be rock solid. And we even saw with the Bulldogs adjusting to those injuries on the run, moving Crichton around and a couple of other things, that they felt some short-term impact of that. Obviously, I think they've got a bye somewhere in the run, so that'll trim
Round
a week
6,
off. that'll trim a week off the absence of those players. If they can get through it, if they go, let's say it's a month and they go 2-1 with a non-game in there, then obviously they'd be pretty happy if they could nurse their way through that. But yeah, they showed with those adjustments, obviously Crichton, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul a little bit, but they've got Hutchison and Hayward and various others that can potentially fill in for the local derby. But that's the challenge that sits in front of them.
And what did you make of the Titans, Sowie?
Looked like a team that missed round one, and it must be hard. Like, starting the season with a bye, you start a week later, you train a little bit longer, and they just look rusty. I think they're going to be okay. I think there's some talking points out of there. Tino Fa'asuamaleaui, the way that he played, great to see him back. Am I sold on the Brimson-Campbell halves combination? Probably not yet. They just look like their kicking game's going to struggle this year. When they're on the front foot, I reckon they're going to be dynamic. But when they're sort of back against it, like last night, you feel like that Campbell, one of those guys, has to go, well, we're not going to score this set. I need to take myself out and kick. So I'll be interested to see. But I think they'll be okay, the Titans. Their pack just looked like they needed a run, to be honest.
Would you have kept Fafita off the field for as long?
Tough to say, because you don't know. I mean, putting him out there when they were getting steamrolled, he's not that kind of guy that's going to come into the middle and change that. I think that David's such a special player, and that's the other thing is, if he's going to start from the bench, how much are you going to get out of him if he only plays 30 minutes, 40 minutes? So knowing Des, I think that you don't want losses. What people realise, like the Broncos, no one wants to lose a game, but no one's ever going to go 26-0. So you can have losses where you learn things, and you can have losses where you just stink. And I reckon they learned a lot last night, the Titans, rather than just being really bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. It is hard to come off a bye in the first round, and as everybody else is sort of, they've had a couple of games in them. So moving on now to what we know here at Zero Tackle very well is some player transfer stuff. So David Klemmer and Ravalawa they've swapped clubs. So what does that mean for the three clubs involved?
Yeah, Ravalawa joining the Bunnies for the remainder of the season, then goes back to the Dragons. At the end of the year, at least that's the plan anyway. We know, as we mentioned earlier, that the Bunnies have had a stack of injuries, Munro, Mitchell, and all of that, a lot of injuries before a ball was kicked in anger, so to speak. So I think that'll, it gives them a bit of depth to cover that, which they're certainly going to need. Obviously, their form has been okay. And then a veteran in Klemmer with all of his experience at international origin and obviously over 200 games previously with a few different clubs. So, and Shane Flanagan mentioning that it'll, bolster the middle forward pack and gives them a little bit of a point of difference. So, it does assist them a little bit going forward, I think. So, a lot of natural reactions to early season setbacks for those clubs, and I think it does help settle them a little bit.
Yeah, what do you make of that one? So the Dragons obviously need some forwards as well.
Yeah, they do. The Francis Milo thing's dragging out. I think both parties would like a resolution on that. The one thing about David Klemmer is he's got an offload and he's going to provide the point of difference because he's tall. They don't have a tall front row. I mean, Couchman's slight but still learning. I think that they could potentially move to Bellin up front. They just look a little bit small, the Dragons, and on the weekend, for everything that was going right, they needed a David Klemmer to just wind up for 10 or 15 minutes and try and change that momentum when they were up against it and then when they were on top. So Mika Ravalawa's try scorer will get you out of your end. I think adding depth at any time. I think we're going to see this more where clubs swap a little bit more, and try and cover, and it gives you some salary cap relief if you're trying to re-sign a kid or up a kid this year. So you're going to see a lot more of it in the NRL in the future.
Yep, absolutely. All right, moving now to some more, maybe not controversial stuff, Lush, but Jeremiah Nanai was dropped for round 2. Was that the right call or the wrong call? What do you reckon?
I think given the result, I would probably say that was the wrong call. Obviously, Nanai's the biggest concern with Nanai is his defense. I would probably argue that the biggest concern for the Cowboys on the weekend was the entire team's defense. There's not one single player on the field the Cowboys didn't exactly play horrifically, but they were playing a Cronulla Sharks team that were on the back end of recovery from the flu and from COVID, having just come back from Vegas. And I felt, as a Sharks fan, that win was somewhat uninspired. So to see them come back, to see them in that game playing as poorly as I thought the Sharks did at certain points, and the Cowboys just couldn't take advantage of that. So it was a little bit of a disappointing game, I think, from both ends. But yeah, look, I don't know, man. I don't know whether or not Ravalawa being dropped like that was the right call. Nanai being dropped like that was the right call at all. I think there's far more there that needs to be addressed by Payten than that.
I love Sharks fans. Like, they just can't be happy. You know, they just... We had the flu. We flew business class to Vegas. Yeah, poor us, you know. We're a top 4 side. Poor us.
That's okay.
Poor us. Look, Jeremiah Nanai, the one thing about Todd Payten, if you follow this side, is he's got standards and he won't budge from them. And no one's playing up to those standards at the moment. I think it was the right call based off what you saw week 1. Yeah, some of the missed tackles. There's missed tackles in the NRL and then there's missed tackles. So, yeah, back when I was playing long time ago, if you missed 4 or 5, you were pretty much front page news. Because they were one-on-one misses, whereas now teams are missing 40, 50 tackles and they're winning games because the game's so fast. And I think that Todd Payten, kicking the ass for Jeremiah Nanai around. He's an Australian player. He's played State of Origin. You can't just have that effort one week and not the other week. Now, he's got lots of problems. They may run last. That's neither here nor there. But if the question was whether it was right or not, I think the standard's been set. And he's probably going to find himself back in the side this week because they're going to have to make some changes again. So, Cowboys struggling. I think they've been the most disappointing side. I think they've been worse than Para, which is saying something. But they know each other. It's not a new system for them. I think they've been really, really poor this year.
Yeah, it's actually been quite shocking how much they've dropped off this year. But, some things to figure out for Todd Payten's men there. So, Darren, last thing on the rundown before we get into the tips. Tyron Wishart. What's the deal with Tyron Wishart?
Yeah, when we did our top 5 transfer targets a few weeks ago, sort of before the season started, he popped up in 8 or 9 clubs, and one of those clubs was Parramatta, where he has been linked quite extensively over the journey. And I guess the key with him was talented enough to be a starter at most sides in the competition, but playing that role off the bench at the powerful Melbourne Storm outfit. And then it's the lure of potential success in that role and moving into something when spots open up, or looking to become a regular somewhere else. And as we were discussing off air, he's probably too good to be a player that comes off the pine. But it does look at this stage like he'll extend at the Storm. He's got an option for 2026 out of contract at the end of this year. That'll be a 3-year run that takes him through. Whether there's any clauses in there that if he doesn't play a certain number of games, he's allowed to leave, or he can explore other options. But a good sign for the Storm and a good show of loyalty for him, given, you would think that he would get more responsibility and more chances somewhere else, particularly a club like Parramatta, given how they're faring. But they might have to look elsewhere, I would say, at this stage. Lush, what are your assessments of that?
Yeah. Look, geez, Craig Bellamy can really make them down there, can't he? Just an absolutely legendary coach. I don't think there's too many people out there who can challenge him for that role aside from Mr. Bennett. But look, I totally agree. It's a lot of talent to be putting on the bench and to be holding on the bench. And it does kind of give me vibes of Nico Hines back when he was popping in and out in the fullback position for the Melbourne Storm. And eventually that lure of playing full-time footy and being a full-time first-grade starter is eventually going to win out somewhere, surely.
I don't think so, boys. I'm going to go the other way. I think that the system at Melbourne is so strong, and everyone that's left Melbourne, they've got their own battles, but I think being a half leaving Melbourne or being one of those utilities is a lot harder because we've seen Nico Hines have an amazing start to his Cronulla career and won a Dally M. Gareth Widdop, when he left to go to the Dragons. What you don't realise is that you're not taking Cameron Munster, Harry Grant and Jerome Hughes with you, or Ryan Pappenhausen. You're going to do it on your own. You're essentially being charged with the keys. Now, there's levels to it. I think that Jerome Luai goes into a pretty good spine, so there's one there. If you're Tyron Wishart, I don't think you leave. I think you continue to learn your craft. You've only played 40-odd games, and what's the rush? You still get a chance to play and learn off Hughes and Munster and maybe when in 2 or 3 years, but I think right now the focus on Melbourne, and this is why Craig Bellamy is so good, is winning, not about individual contracts. And the other one that comes to mind is Jonah Pezzett. He re-signed with a clause in his contract that if Jerome Hughes re-signs, he can look elsewhere. That doesn't mean he's going to go elsewhere, but that just shows the strength of the Melbourne system. It's you need us, not we need you, sort of thing. So whereas other desperate clubs, if he gets a ridiculous offer, I have no doubt that he'll look at it, but right now, I can't see him leaving.
Yeah, if there's another $14 million contract floating around, I'm sure he'd take it. But if he were to leave, where is he best suited, Daz?
Well, I think certainly, there'd be a number of those suitors out there. Parramatta, as we keep hearing, are have been the front runners in that space. His father played for the Dragons, not necessarily that means anything. I know his father played with Jason Riles who's at the Eels now as well. That's the one that seems to be spoken about a lot, but it looks like they're going to have to wait until at least probably the end of 2026 to consider that type of option. There's already been other players touted for the Eels, suggesting that they've changed their focus a little bit, but that would be the front runner, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. Let's get our tips in for round 3. We're going to go around the table. We'll go Darren, Lush, and then Sowie. First game, Storm versus Panthers. Panthers coming off a loss. Daz, who you tipping?
Yeah, that concerns me a little bit as a Storm fan. I think on the balance of pre-season and even belief in growth of the list, the Storm would have been favourites and are favourites in this game, and I think they win, but the Panthers on the rebound concerns me a little bit, but Storm.
Yep. Lush?
I'm going to go to the Storm as well, which is bizarre to think that in round 3, the Panthers are going to be 1 and 2. But I think the Panthers are going to end up missing Dylan Edwards way too much this week. So, Storm for me.
You, Sowie? Yep. Warriors, Roosters, Darren?
Warriors. Roosters good last week, but Warriors will get them.
Yep. Lush?
Yep. Warriors.
Warriors with a question mark. We didn't give the Roosters a hope last week against the 4-time premiers. Trent Robinson may have bottled something there, so I'm not sure. I think they may have an all right record over there too, the Roosters, up against the Warriors. So I'm going to say Warriors, but there's a watch on when the squads are named and if they get anyone back or if they move anything around. But Warriors potentially maybe changing later in the week.
Yep. Broncos, Cowboys, Darren?
I think Broncos far too good.
Yep. Lush?
Yeah, I think we're all a little bit surprised to see the Broncos drop a game this weekend. So I would definitely be going the Broncos to bounce back in stylish fashion.
Sowie?
Broncos too good to play like they did 2 weeks in a row, and Reece Walsh is too good looking to play like he did 2 weeks in a row. So I'm going to say Reece Walsh to play pretty good this weekend and the Broncos to win.
Yeah. Darren, Sharks, Rabbitohs? Good game.
Yeah, Sharks still a contender despite that Vegas loss. Hit back hard last week. They win again.
Lush?
I'm 50-50 on this one, but I'm going to follow my heart and I'm going to go to the Sharks.
Honestly, they try so hard to be the underdogs of Sharks. They're a really good side. Sharks for me. Rabbitohs won't beat themselves, so this will be nitty gritty for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Darren, Dolphins, Tigers.
I've tipped the Tigers every week. I'm 1-1. I think they win again. I like their improvement.
Lush?
I really want to go the Dolphins. I really like. Yeah, I don't know, man. The high that the Tigers are going to be on after that win last week, I think Luai is definitely the X factor for that team. I think it's going to be the Tigers again.
Sowie?
Yeah, very similar to the Warriors-Roosters game, this one for me. It says Tigers off form and what we've seen, but Dolphins at home, settled now after a couple of rough weeks with the Cyclones and stuff like that. I'm going to say Dolphins. I just can't see them. There has to be some sort of improvement soon.
Yep. Darren, Titans and Knights.
Hard game to tip. Knights better winning round 2 than they're winning round 1. I think the Titans will improve after that really, blowing the cobwebs out last week. Flip of the coin. Gold Coast just.
Yeah. Lush?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really tight one. I'm going to go the Knights. I think the Knights are on a bit of a roll at the moment. So, yeah.
Yep. Sowie?
Yeah, it's a really good weekend of footy.
It is.
I'm gonna say Knights but huge watch on the Titans bounce back after getting back home and being run. I think both those games on Saturday, probably all 3 could be decided by less than a try. Just Newcastle. I tipped them to come last, and I haven't been right in 10 years, so that's a good omen for them. But Titans should be a lot better at home.
Yeah. All right. Daz, Eels and Bulldogs.
Bulldogs vulnerable, but not vulnerable enough to lose this. I think they'll go 3-zip.
Yep. Lush?
See, I'm of the same mind, but I'm also a little bit chaotic, so screw it. Let's go the Eels.
Sowie?
Bulldogs for me. Unfortunately, the Eels have got a lot of guys that are trying at the moment, but they just haven't got the system. I don't know if they've got the points in them, to be honest, to be able to come up and, especially if the Bulldogs get in the mood they were in last night.
Yep. Darren, last one. Manly Raiders. Haven't talked about the Raiders much, but they look good.
They do look good, and Manly are certainly going to want to improve. I mean, their round 1 performance wins the game. Their round 2 performance doesn't, but I think round 1's closer to reality, so I think they'll bounce back.
Lush?
Yeah, I'm going to go the Raiders on this one. I think Sticky's got those the Canberra Raiders in really good form at the moment. They're fit. They're moving quick. I think the Eagles are going to struggle after, depending on whether or not... depending on whether or not their DCE is back this week or not, I think.
Yep. I think he should be back. Sowie?
Yeah, watch on the injuries. I've got... It just screams Ricky Stewart, bus trip up. Boys, I'll leave the beers on the bus. We're going to get absolutely, on the way home after we beat these blokes. And I've tipped against the Raiders the last 2 weeks. So I'm going to say Manly if DCE is in. If he's not, huge watch the Raiders to be 3-0.
Yep. Yep. Interesting stuff. All right. That brings us to the end of this week's episode. Thank you, fellas, for coming on. Darren, you'll be around the channel as always. Lush, what have you got to plug, mate?
So I run my own pop culture podcast with a couple of my mates down here in Melbourne, the Post-Credit Show. So if you're interested in your... movies, TV shows, comic books, all that kind of nerdy goodness. Head on over to @the Post Credit Show and come give us a listen. We're on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and all over socials.
Beautiful. And Sowie, you've got a podcast coming up as well.
Yeah, we've launched Rugby League Guru. Anyone that follows Rugby League will know who Guru is. He's a nuffy like me. We love our rugby league. So we launched a podcast called Take the Two. It's on YouTube every Thursday at 3:00. And then after that, you can download on or where you get all the podcasts. But we've started off fast. Plenty to talk about. There's been a couple of big storylines already this year. So hopefully those storylines continue with some of the footy on the weekend.
Yeah. Beautiful stuff. All right, thank you so much for joining the show, everybody. Catch us next week and catch all the latest NRL news at zerotackle.com. See you next week. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and throw down your opinions in the comments.